So, the Brooklyn Nets are batting 1,000 against the LA teams. I'm just saying. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. If you have not already subscribed, go ahead and do that below. Today, we're discussing the Brooklyn Nets' recent two-day stay at the Staples Center, in which they defeated the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers 109-98 in a game that was not as close as that score may indicate, before following that up with a 112-108 victory against the LA Clippers. We've got a lot to cover today, so without further ado, let's get into it. So I may or may not have compared the Brooklyn Nets to the Golden State Warriors this weekend, which yeah, sure, sounds a little crazy. But just looking at their transition numbers, which are ranked #1 on cleaningtheglass.com, that comparison starts to not sound so ridiculous. The two games against the LA teams were a great example of just how lethal the Nets are in the fast break. After DeAndre Jordan does a nice job playing a little bit higher against this LA Clippers ball screen, thereby forcing Paul George to the baseline where he turns it over, watch how patient the Nets are in transition when finding the best shot. James Harden and Bruce Brown play hot potato for a second, and with the Clippers defense focusing on protecting the paint, Bruce Brown locates Landry Shamet in the corner for three. The Nets just appear to be more comfortable with each other from a spatial perspective on the fast break. On this Lakers turnover, Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot pushes it, Kyrie Irving laces a nice pass to Tyler Johnson, knowing that Landry Shamet is running to that deep corner, and by giving Tyler Johnson the ball, there's a better angle to find Landry Shamet for the corner three. Kyrie Irving and James Harden's transition chemistry has been readily apparent. Harden hits Kyrie early to send him downhill with a running start. Irving kicks back out to James Harden, who was open at the three. Harden gets run off the line, and then dumps it to Kyrie, hanging out in that dunker spot, who showcases that beautiful at-rim finishing game. No words are even needed for this. These dudes are pulling off Harlem Globetrotters stuff night to night. What you're watching is two guys that are incredibly aware of how truly unstoppable they are on offense. We've talked a lot about defense on this channel because no big deal, it's probably what makes or breaks the Nets on the road to a championship. And after having 3 impressive showings on the first 3 games of this road trip, which you can learn more about on my channel, the Brooklyn Nets once again came out with defensive intensity against the two LA teams. However, interestingly enough, Brooklyn's style of defense varied from the Lakers game to the Clippers game. The Nets are starting to become malleable on defense, game planning for their opponent. Against the Lakers, the game plan was simple. Take away the paint for LeBron James at all costs, and dare the Lakers, ranked 20th in three-point percentage, to shoot. On this drive, look at how many bodies are thrown LeBron James's way. DeAndre Jordan helps off of Marc Gasol, Jeff Green ignores Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as he streaks out to that right corner, and TLC essentially guards 2 players at once, Marc Gasol and Talen Horton-Tucker. This forces a crazy kick-out pass from LeBron James and a somewhat contested THT look. On this play, it appears as if James Harden is dropping against LeBron James, hanging back in the paint in the event that James drives to the basket. And then on this play, after Kyrie Irving and Landry Shamet exchange matchups a couple of times up top, almost as if they're in a zone, watch how DeAndre Jordan completely leaves Marc Gasol to go contest Kentavious Caldwell-Pope at the basket, while Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot helps inward as well by leaving Talen Horton-Tucker and Alex Caruso alone in the corner, eventually forcing a turnover. Against the Clippers, the Nets were back to their switching ways, keeping the ball up top by exchanging matchups to thwart the best team in the league at shooting threes according to percentage. Landry Shamet and James Harden switch on this Clippers dribble handoff. Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot and Joe Harris switch on the weak side of the floor, and then Joe Harris denies the passing lane to Paul George to slightly slow down the Clippers' possession. The Clippers flow into a Lou Williams-Paul George pick and roll, and the Nets simply switch to put James Harden on Paul George, but George is in his bag and makes the tough contested 2. The Nets also use switching to be more attentive to matchups. After Kyrie Irving gets matched up with Kawhi Leonard in transition, DeAndre Jordan goes over to help in the post. Watch what the remaining 3 Nets do. Bruce Brown picks up Nick Batum to take away the closest pass, and then Jeff Green and Joe Harris zone up the remaining 3 players, with Joe Harris playing in the middle of Reggie Jackson and Patrick Beverley, and Jeff Green playing in the middle of Beverley and Serge Ibaka. When Kawhi launches the pass, the Nets already converge middle, and it's an easy steal for the Nets. In my last video, we discussed how the Nets were switching double drag, which is of course that transition set with 2 screens facing the sidelines. Rather than having James Harden try to skate over 2 screens, the Nets just switched down the line, with James Harden grabbing Marcus Morris, Joe Harris grabbing Patrick Beverley, and Bruce Brown meeting Kawhi on the other side. Once Kawhi drives to the basket, James Harden leaves his man to go help Bruce Brown down low against the incredibly strong Kawhi Leonard, and the Nets go in scramble mode and nail their rotations. Joe Harris sprints to Marcus Morris, and as Harris is making his move, DeAndre Jordan sprints over to Patrick Beverley. While this is happening, Bruce Brown takes off to Nick Batum in the corner, contests the three, and ultimately forces Batum off his rhythm for the missed corner look. Even the Nets' scram switches were better, which we discussed in my last video, with DeAndre Jordan kicking Landry Shamet out of the matchup down low to go contest Lou Williams in the corner. One last bonus piece, I thought it was really interesting how the Nets use Kyrie Irving as, I don't want to say a stopper, but a part of slowing down Kawhi Leonard. On the very first possession of the game, the Nets use Kyrie Irving in a hard hedge to buy Jeff Green time after getting hit by the Patrick Beverley screen. The hard hedge, of course, being when Kyrie Irving guards Kawhi Leonard for a brief second before switching back to his original man to end the possession. But overall, I just thought it was an interesting way to make the most of Kyrie Irving's quickness and above average one-on-one defense to buy time for his teammates with such a tough assignment like Kawhi Leonard. Versus the Lakers and their number one ranked defense, the Nets didn't exactly do this a ton, but against the Clippers and their 18th ranked unit per cleaning the glass, the Nets went mismatch hunting. I was genuinely shocked to see the Nets go at Nick Batum the way they did, especially after Batum has had such a nice year reclamating his image as a 3-and-D player. But 3 minutes into the game, the Nets made it known that they were going to take advantage of Nick Batum's lack of foot speed. Joe Harris nails Patrick Beverley with a screen to give James Harden the Batum matchup, and Harden crosses Batum into oblivion before scoring the layup at the cup. 3 minutes later, the Nets were at it again, with Jeff Green setting the screen on Kawhi Leonard and James Harden hitting the cruel step back in Batum's grill. Same thing a minute later, this time Jeff Green is screening on Kawhi Leonard in transition. On this play, Joe Harris screening Patrick Beverley to give James Harden the Batum mismatch eventually opens things up for Bruce Brown when Serge Ibaka is forced to rotate over to attempt to stop James Harden at the rim, while Paul George is forced to cover Kyrie Irving in that weak side corner. Just take a look at the way the Nets take their time to surgically locate Nick Batum and coerce the mismatch. Paul George is preoccupied with James Harden blowing by Nick Batum, so he helps inward a little bit, off Joe Harris, and James Harden flips the pass for the Joey Buckets 3. And then here, a very similar play, Paul George is preoccupied with the action up top between Harden and Batum. Kyrie Irving sneaks in with a nice little flare screen to give Harris that extra bit of room for the open 3. Speaking of Kyrie, he got in on the action of mismatch hunting against Batum as well. And after Joe Harris screens Patrick Beverley to give Kyrie Irving the matchup with the weakest defender on the floor, Paul George foolishly double teams, leading to the Jeff Green open dunk. This was just a masterclass in mismatch hunting. After timeouts represents a team's best chance at drawing up really detailed, nuanced sets. And Nash's ATOs against the two LA teams were simple but incredibly effective. Against the Lakers, the Nets focused more on drawing up plays that gave them perimeter shots, which makes sense because in the LeBron-Anthony Davis era, the Lakers have been pretty good at limiting at-rim attempts. To begin, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot sets a back screen, which is a screen that faces the opposite baseline for Landry Shamet. And because Shamet is streaking towards the hoop, the Lakers assume that this is for an at-rim shot, but it's misdirection. Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot curls around this DeAndre Jordan flare screen and gets a completely open look over the slow-plodding Marc Gasol. Same play here, James Harden sets a back screen for Joe Harris, but Harris runs away from that screen around DeAndre's screening body to eventually connect on the catch-and-shoot mid-range attempt. But in the very next game against the Clippers, the Nets played with their opponent's expectations, after a game of mostly hunting for perimeter shots and out-of-bounds sets. Here, it appears as if DeAndre Jordan is setting a pin-down screen, which is a screen that faces the basket for Joe Harris, likely to open up an outside shot for one of the best shooters in the world. But seeing that Kawhi Leonard is preoccupied with halting the Nets' sharpshooter, DeAndre Jordan slips by leaving a beat early before actually setting the screen for the alley-oop from James Harden. And here the Nets are again messing with the opponent's mind. The most dangerous player on the floor is the inbounder, and Kyrie Irving sets a nice screen to run Joe Harris off the DeAndre Jordan handoff for the open 3. All in all, this was a very impressive 2-game stretch of Brooklyn Nets basketball. The Nets improved on what they're already good at, the switching, the mismatch hunting, and they actually game planned for their opponent, playing off expectations to create advantages in a more tactical way. Nash's timeout sets were excellent, and I apologize for the cliche, but the Nets put the league on notice. And with that, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and go ahead and share this on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. We're doing something a little bit different today. I'm actually doing my first giveaway. Shouts to my guy Colin Brady on Twitter for help setting this up. For this giveaway, I am giving away a Jean-Michel Basquiat 40th Anniversary Edition book, which features pristine reproductions of Basquiat's seminal paintings, drawings, and notebook sketches, as well as a little bit of text from editor Hans Warner Holsworth. Basquiat is obviously a huge part of the Brooklyn Nets season, so I'm really thrilled to be able to give this away. All you have to do to enter is simply like this video, which I hope you're already doing. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. More videos like this all the time. And then just comment your favorite game of this Brooklyn Nets season. I feel like there's a lot to choose from. You could pick one of these two LA games. You could be a total cynic and pick the Detroit Pistons game. It's been an incredibly fun season, and I'm curious about what your answers may be. Per usual, follow me on Twitter. The link is below. And that's all I got today. Peace!